believers, we are the hope keepers, living to make a difference. And there's nowhere like this, no, there's nowhere like this. And I love government, lose 13. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Handle schools, and I love government, I'm living local and it's everything to me. We are the believers, we are the hope keepers, living to make a difference. And there's nowhere like this, no, there's nowhere like this. And I love government, lose 13. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Handle schools, and I love government, I'm living local and it's everything to me. We are the believers, we are the hope keepers, living to make a difference. And there's nowhere like this, no, there's nowhere like this. And I love government, lose 13. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Handle schools, and I love government, I'm living local and it's everything to me. We are the believers, we are the hope keepers, living to make a difference. And there's nowhere like this, no, there's nowhere like this. And I love government, lose 13. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Handle schools, and I love
Moment, I appreciate you taking the University of Miami and not that other school over there to come down and sign the bill, because when I say we, I still refer to myself as a student athlete. We watched as other people were profiting and making money, and we enjoyed, one, playing, two, getting our education, and then for some of us that were lucky enough to go on to professional sports, whether it was basketball or football, we were fortunate of where we started in receiving our scholarship, but at the same time, we still understood the economics of what we did and how much we produced financially for the university, for college sports in general. And we had always felt that there was going to come a tipping point for the student athletes to finally come together and say enough is enough in regards to financing and being compensated for your image and likeness. And I think that one good step was state of California. Their bill won't go into enact in 2023, and so I love that Governor DeSantis essentially one-upped them. One, took a much more comprehensive look at what it is to only give the benefits and not allow, let's say, boosters to get involved, which then starts to deteriorate the credibility of college sports. And so I also applaud that part, Governor DeSantis, to really think through what it is that we're trying to accomplish right now. We're not trying to accomplish boosters meddling in with college sports and college athletes, agents getting paid, and everyone now starting to ruin the game of college sports because of its purity. That's why we love college sports. And we did that, and not only did Governor DeSantis do that, he then took it a step further and said, we're going to enact this in 2021. And that puts a lot of pressure on the NCAA, because frankly that has been the crux of everyone's issue right now, is the NCAA kind of sitting back, and we're talking 30 years now, where players have whispered about it, they've rumbled about it, they've said, hey, how come we're not getting paid? NCAA liked status quo, and unfortunately for them, the time has come. And fortunately for us, we have a governor and Governor DeSantis that said we're going to push the agenda and we're going to push it immediately, forcing the NCAA to act. So I applaud, again, I thank you, Governor DeSantis. I applaud his efforts. I applaud our efforts. I'm nothing but happy for the college student athletes and their college experience. I think it will be better for it. And again, these are all pluses to keep up with the times of college sports. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, thanks a lot, Jonathan, and thanks for all you're doing for the University of Miami. Corey Simon was a really feared defensive lineman for Florida State, part of the national championship that they won in the late 90s under Coach Bowden, and had a great career with the Philadelphia Eagles. He is originally from South Florida, but makes his home now in the Tallahassee area. He's involved with a lot of youth sports, youth football in Tallahassee, and was with us at the beginning of this when we announced that this was the way to go. We had Keone, we had Chip, and Corey was being able to speak from the athlete's perspective, saying that this would be a good idea. And I would remind people, when we did that press conference last fall, I think within a week the NCAA came out and said, hey, we're going to have to reevaluate this, because California had fallen. But, California's out. But then when you had Florida, those are two, real heavyweights there. And I know some other states are now starting to look at this as well. And so this will, I think, create, even more incentive to do it. But I wanted to let Corey Simon come up and say a few words in enemy territory.
Go Noles. That's right. Go Noles. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, legislator. The fact that we stood in the Capitol last fall and talked about this and brought it to the attention of everybody out there, it's encouraging to see it move through both the House and the Senate and now become law. I want you all to take a look, and those that are out there, to take a look at this from the player perspective. And not just the player, but the student athlete. Because a lot of kids, and you can ask them all, a lot of kids sacrifice to come to college as student athletes. Because many of them were working, bringing money in the home, and the parents said, listen, you have to go get this education. You have to go live your dream. But they still left behind a burden that they deal with every single day. They're not only trying to feed themselves, but they're trying to send money home and help their families. And I think we get caught up in the moment where we start to look at athletes as we're just robots, and we're out there just playing a game for everybody's enjoyment. But once we leave that court, once we leave that field, there's still a responsibility that we have to our communities, to our homes, that we have to carry. And so what this does is this now allows those athletes to go in and be creative. Listen, it's not just about football. It's not just about basketball. We had a young lady that played soccer at Florida State University, and she had 500,000 followers on Twitter and Instagram. She should be able to monetize that. She should be able to take advantage of that. Some of these players that come in, it's that old adage, strike while the iron's hot. Well, for some of them, it will never be as hot as it is when they step foot on a college campus. And so if we're sending these players into these campuses and we're saying, okay, well, you go to class and you study real hard and to get a good job, but we don't tell that to all of the other folks that are out there that are just students and they can go and make money while they're in college, then we're cheating these student athletes. And so I'm so proud of what the governor and the legislature has done to now make this a reality for our young athletes that are coming onto these campuses, that they no longer have to carry this burden, that they have an opportunity to go out there and monetize their talents. And so thank you guys. We really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing this thing move forward. There's a lot of things that universities can do to help these students, and some of that is written into this bill. I'd love to see those universities really start to teach these young athletes what it is to make money and how to take care of it and how to make that money work for you and not waste it. And so that's my charge to our student athletes is you're going to get some money. Don't waste it. Take care of it. Make sure you have something when you leave college. And so thank you guys. Thanks everybody that has made this happen. Governor, thank you again.
Awesome.
Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all today. As we all know, the Sunshine State has long been the envy and a powerhouse for college athletics. And we have a long and proud history of not only producing national championship teams, but also providing a pipeline to professional and Olympic sports. And I would say that today as I stand here at the U, and I must admit I did not attend the University of Miami, but like everyone in my age bracket, grew up a proud Hurricanes fan, watching a dynasty. It is a great privilege to be able to be here and see this bill come to fruition. Oftentimes we have neglected to account and emphasize the importance of those individual athletes. And yes, our programs have benefited financially, and our state has garnered the type of distinction that long has provided a pipeline, again, for these individual athletes to pursue and further their careers. But today, I think we are proud, under Governor DeSantis' leadership and the leadership of our legislators that are here today, to ensure that individual athletes will no longer be relegated to the sidelines, no pun intended, and forbidden from benefiting financially from their name, likeness, and image. And so today, as Governor DeSantis signs this bill into law, we're ensuring that those select few who train and who have sacrificed, as you heard our former athletes talk about, that they have spent countless hours, and those that have felt the pain of crushed bones and crushed spirits along the way, that they will be able to be compensated. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity for our athletes and our students, and I think we have no better way of doing that with a governor who understands all too well the importance, the dedication of student athletics. And so I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be a part of it. And to our former athletes and our current athletes that are standing behind us, I say congratulations. And let's bring back some more championships to our state. I know the governor's looking forward to that, and I am as well. So thank you all very much. And I think we're going to turn it over to our senator. Is that correct, Governor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you guys for being here. And you know, when and I will tell you this, a true story is when I first found out about this bill, my son, Evan, who is at Troy State University studying a master's program in sports management, said, "Mom, you guys need to get up to speed on this. California has this bill, and as Governor DeSantis says, you know, Florida needs to be the leader in this." And so I reached out, and just happened that Representative LaMarca, who is going to be speaking next, had a bill on the House side. So I asked him, I said, well, can I sponsor this on the Senate side? This is really something that has been needed for a long time. And as I spoke to the student athletes behind me, we have so many talented students here in Florida, and they deserve to be able to take their talent and be able to understand and learn the free enterprise. And as Governor DeSantis said, this is about a fairness. There are students that are able to do that, but yet our 11,000 athletic students in college are not able to do that. So I was excited to be able to be part of this program. I think this is a great day in the state of Florida that will allow this. And as Governor DeSantis said earlier, the bill will not go into effect for a year. So some of these athletes standing behind us will not be able to benefit, but a lot of them will. And in speaking to them, they are really in support of this, and they know this is a long time coming. So, and as it was also said that the NCAA, this is going to put pressure on them to have to do something. And so, Governor DeSantis, thank you. This was at the right time to be able to do this, and I want to thank our other guests that were here in support of this. You know, a bill is very hard to keep clean going through the process. And that's what we did with this bill, because we knew an exact vision that we wanted this to do in order for this to get through the process and pass. And I think that's the product that we came up with. So thank you guys for coming to this event, and I look forward to some really great success outcome of allowing our students to be able to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when you have a governor who was a starter and not a backup. We brought this issue to Governor DeSantis back in committee week meetings. We sat and talked about it, and he was very cautious about issues of finances and making sure students were prepared. And we started rolling these things into the bill. And as Senator Mayfield mentioned, we did sit and talk with quite a few senators before we kind of went down this road together. I was proud to have the support of the Minority Leader McGee in the Florida House. But one of the things that we didn't talk about here about our student athletes, and you heard from two amazing ones, and trust me, if Florida State was kicker U, there would never been a linebacker U. Unfortunately, they weren't. Those are some great games. But when we think about Florida, Florida State, Miami, and even some of the other teams, you know, but for them all being in one state, there'd be a lot more championships here. What we didn't talk about, though, were these student athletes that were described by two former student athletes, that 19% of them are struggling with homelessness, and up to 24% are struggling with food insecurity. And you think everything is here. Well, students were asked to go home, but they weren't necessarily sent to their own home if they didn't have one, and they weren't necessarily sent with food. The folks here at University of Miami were the very first leaders we spoke with, and we spoke to them all around the state of Florida, and they were very gracious with their time. They came up to our office, and we talked about these issues. But well, so many, as was mentioned, While so many people profited off their talents, these young students were left behind in an athletic system, quite honestly, that's centered on greed. But today we changed that. We changed that with Governor DeSantis. As I had said before, Florida is not a follower. We're a bold leader that takes steps and leaps while others sit in the sidelines. And today, with the athletic directors, university leaders, sports industry professionals, former and current athletes, and these amazing student athletes that are behind us. And Corey, I hate to correct you because you're much bigger than me, but she had 1.5 million Instagram followers, Dana Castellanos did. And she's now playing professional, thank God, because she could not use those while she was in school. Wearing a school's jersey should not mean choosing between your talent and earning money to support your education and your family. Now more than ever, as we've seen, students must have the flexibility to continue their education, provide for themselves and their families. Every one of the nearly 500,000 student athletes across the United States of America should be able to earn from their talent. And if the third largest state in the United States can do it, then so can the Collegiate Athlete Organization. When I began this journey, as I mentioned, the team did not expect this outpouring of support. And we were honored to be able to spend a few minutes with the governor. I can tell you that it does help to be from Broward County when his chief of staff is from Broward County. So I want to say thank you to you, Governor DeSantis, for your steadfast support of this. Looking forward to seeing the bill not only signed but implemented next July. I think what you're going to do here, along with the other legislators and the people who have spoken about this, is change the conversation that the NCAA, the NAIA, or anyone else is having from a United States Congress and Senate perspective. We're going to finally start seeing these bills come where they're national, and we'll be able to do this around the entire country. I don't really want to. Of course, we all want to have Florida have a little benefit, but for this first year until they get their act together, maybe we'll have a benefit. So, Governor, thank you very much.
Thank you. And let me begin by saying, Corey, don't worry about it. We've enacted the ceasefire, so we're going to be all right here. And secondly, let me just say this to Mr. Governor. Thank you very much. It seems like yesterday when we met and we discussed the intricacies of the bill, you were steadfast. You stood on the right side of history. You understood the importance and the fairness of something of this nature. And secondly, let me thank my colleagues in the Florida House and also Senator for the reality check. Many people say that Democrats and Republicans tend to have a problem when it comes down to putting the people's interests first. But what we've realized through this bill is that we, as elected officials, we have bosses. And the bosses have spoken throughout the great state of Florida. And they said that they wanted their students, their kids, who are great athletes, to have an opportunity to capitalize off of their name, their image, and their likeness. We understood early on that it was an unfair process. We understood also that the status quo that the NCAA held was wrong. And we challenged them, and we're not going to back down. So to all the college student athletes out there, fairness is here. This is the day that you've been waiting for, and we're standing 100% with you. And yes, I am going to close and say this: go you.
Well, thanks to all the legislators, and I'll sign this bill in a minute. I would just say that Florida is leading on this, and if you're a blue chip high school recruit out there thinking about where you want to go, one of our Florida schools I think is a great landing spot for anywhere in the country, but particularly for all our great Florida high school players, stay in state. I don't want to see people going to Alabama and Clemson, and I know they've got good programs, but I think there's nothing better than winning a national championship in your home state. So maybe this will be added enticement. We'll see what happens, but I think it's a great first step, and it will be law in about a minute. So I'm happy to sign it. You guys want to gather around? Today's date, the 12th?
Yes.
All right. Corey? Thank you. All right, last one. Who wants it? There we go. All right, it's done. Good job, everybody. All right, I think I'll stop over here, do a little press over there, and then we'll head out.
Thank you guys all.
staying behind the podium? All right. Michael? Well, I think it's interesting. We did the phase one like 6 weeks ago. So the idea that all of a sudden now would be linked to that. But when I went back and looked at, I said, okay, what about Memorial Day? Because a lot of people thought that weekend maybe would do something. But if you look at from the Memorial Day weekend, I looked from I think the 24th till today, Miami-Dade COVID hospitalizations are down 13%. Duval County, where they're going to have the Republican National Committee, Memorial Day weekend to the present, COVID hospitalizations are down 50%. And so I think it's important for people to understand who is being tested now compared to who was being tested in March and early April when we had kind of our peaks then. Back then, you needed to have symptoms, and you really, unless you got a doctor's note, in our test sites, because of CDC's guidance, you're looking at age 65 or above. So the majority of cases we were getting were kind of in people in more of the high-risk groups. Now we have widespread testing. We're doing 3 times as many tests a day now than we did at the end of March, which is partially what the numbers, but partially you don't have to have symptoms. You don't have to, there's no age restrictions. So what you're seeing is, well, I think the number one outbreak we've seen is in the agriculture communities. You're seeing there was just a big case dump in north central Florida. There was a watermelon farm. You've had farm communities in Collier, Palm Beach, Martin, Levy, Hendry. And what happens is these are workers that are working close together. Once one gets it, it tends to spread very rapidly throughout those areas. Now, there have been mitigation strategies that are in place to do it. The good thing about that is these are people in low-risk groups, so you have almost none of them end up hospitalized. The fear would be is if they're in multi-generational housing and maybe have contact with the senior citizen, or if they're going out into town. We're also concerned about a lot of these farm workers. This is about the time of year they start to leave to go to other states. So we're talking with some of the other states to let them know. We also have our Department of Health is working with our growers to mitigate any of the spread. But if you look at the state of Florida and the percent positivity by county, all counties that are 10%, and we don't have any, I think, that are above 15, but the 10 to 15% counties is all because they either have agriculture outbreaks or prisons or both. In some of the rural counties, you know, the prisons, they'll have big time population will test positive. So we made a decision about 3 weeks ago with the Department of Health to have all the local county health go into these communities and test. So you're seeing part of it is that. Another part of it is we're now almost finished testing all staff and residents of long-term care facilities. If you look, the average member of the public goes and gets tested, and you have 95 to 98% test negative. In those long-term care facilities, the residents test positive at about 8%. So that's a higher positive, not a huge positivity. I mean, certainly anything under 10 is considered good, and particularly that high-risk environment. But you do see that. So we should be having all those tests done, all those remaining results reported, hopefully over the next few days. And so that will also be another thing. But that has absolutely been a big factor in what we've seen over the last couple weeks, because those are the most difficult areas. But I think that's the right thing to do, to go into the areas where we know you're more likely to see outbreaks, isolate those outbreaks so that it's not spreading beyond in there. And then what you also have now too, CVS, all these places, you can now go get tests. And so I think what we're seeing is of the people that are testing positive, way more are in the 25 to 45 than was happening 2 months ago. Well, those 25 to 45-year-olds, the clinical consequences of them testing positive is usually very, very modest because they're not in the high-risk groups. But I think you have businesses that are really working to get their employees tested. And for example, if you're working at a restaurant and you get tested and you're positive, then you're isolated. So that's a good thing because it prevents that from being able to be spread. Now, these are people who, by and large, do not have any symptoms. So they're being told as a precautionary measure to test. So we're going to continue going. We'll be at 30,000 roughly test results a day for the foreseeable future. If you remember, about a month ago, I was imploring people to get tested because we just weren't having enough people show up. And I think part of it is that the businesses have wanted more people to go in, and then obviously we've done a lot more with the agriculture community. But I do think you're starting to see more people in the public that are interested in getting tested. So that is a good thing to be doing. But I don't think, you look at the numbers, you got to look at the clinical consequences. And we know now with the data overwhelmingly that the clinical consequences are almost entirely borne by the people that are 65 and older. Not entirely, but if you look, 85% of the COVID-related fatalities in Florida are age 65 and above, and we've actually had more COVID-related fatalities age 90 and above than we've had age 65 and below. So if you're seeing an area where you have positive cases and they're in that younger demographic, probably not as significant clinically. It is significant to make sure that they're isolated and then they're not interacting with seniors, and particularly, obviously, at a nursing home or a long-term care facility. Yes, sir. Well, we'll see. That's a couple months away. As I mentioned, the Duval County, their hospitalizations are down 50% since May 24th for COVID-related, which obviously is a good sign. They've had a relatively minor outbreak compared to other parts of the country. But I know they're all working on that. I know they're going to be talking with local government, local health officials, all this, and they're going to be able to work it out. I would remind people that we just were through an era, a 2-week period, where you had tens of thousands of people gathering in very close proximity, Hollywood, California, New York, all these places. There is not yet evidence that I'm aware of that has sparked any type of significant outbreaks. We have our health folks looking to see if we see anything in Florida. I think the places that had the biggest demonstrations were Orlando and Tampa, so they are looking at that. But as of now, you have not seen evidence that has really led to any type of thing. In fact, in Florida, we're seeing it's the close, lengthy contact in the workplace, like in the agriculture, that's really driving it, or in long-term care facilities. So, but I think that's going to be something that people are going to need to continue to look at. If we're now another week out and you don't see any outbreaks in any of those places, well, that's a signal to me that some of these outdoor events would likely be okay if you had some basic precautions. Some of those demonstrators were wearing the mask, but obviously they weren't social distance. They were just too close together. Yes, sir. Yeah, I think, well, first of all, the RNC is going to do a lot. When they came to me, they said, we plan on testing, we plan on doing this stuff. So it wasn't like they were coming empty-handed and just saying that they were expected to have nothing. They've been thinking about this a long time, and I think it'll be a mix of mitigation measures and testing, but they are really working hard on it. They're working hard with the folks at the White House, and so it was convinced to me that that it could be done in a way that minimized risk to folks. And of course, if some of the delegates span different demographics, if you're somebody who's in more the at-risk demographic, then that may be something that you want to consider in terms of whatever type of measures that you can do. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question. Okay. Oh, yeah. So the Pulse, we put out a proclamation. We've lowered the flag at half staff. Without question, one of the most dastardly deeds that's ever been done in the state of Florida. It's I think reverberates to this day, and I think it was appropriate to continue to recognize the memorial of the anniversary with the flag at half-staff, for the people of Orlando, for LBGT community, for the folks involved with Pulse nightclub, and we don't want to ever see anything like that happen again. Oh, well, I think it's you're talking about a massive economic impact. I think you're going to have folks that are going to be able to spend a lot of money. I think it'll help with the economic recovery, and I think it's something that is that is good for Northeast Florida in particular as they really get going. And they've actually, I'll tell you, if you look, look, we're not out of the woods with the jobs by any stretch, but to see what happened in May versus what was predicted, if we can continue to get people back to work, that is going to alleviate so many problems that we're seeing in society. And, people didn't talk about in March and April all the negative effects about what was happening as a result of the mitigation. But the fact is, those effects were real. Florida, we did our best to minimize those effects, and I think we did a better job than many other states. But let's not kid ourselves and act like those effects aren't profound, and not just in terms of economics, in terms of social, in terms of public health, for other things. We are still now in a situation where we have a lot of kids that haven't gotten their immunizations. Now, kids are at extremely low risk for COVID, but if you're not immunizing the kids, you could have outbreaks and other things like measles. We are still trying to get more people to go into the hospital for other ailments. If you look, we still, even though we have all elective surgeries, everything is 100% green light, do what you need to do, we still have between 25 and 30% of the hospital beds that are sitting empty right now. And part of that is because our COVID patients have been pretty stable over the last 6 weeks. But part of it is you don't have as many people that are going to be able to get treatment that they should be getting. Maybe that's still lingering fear of going to the hospital, but our message has been take care of yourself. The hospital is going to be a safe place to go. If you're having heart trouble, if you're having stroke symptoms, you do not want to put that off, because then the health effects of that will cascade. Well, because I think initially the CDC's guidelines where you had to be symptomatic, which most of them are asymptomatic. In fact, there was it wasn't in Florida, but a Tyson chicken plant they had one symptomatic worker, so they tested a bunch of them, and they had 199 asymptomatic positives. And so I think it was very few of those people, if at all, develop symptoms. And then when you have the age range that they're in, remember CDC initially was 65 and above, so a lot of that just fell through the cracks. But when we brought in the criteria, we were doing a lot of that through drive-through sites. So people would drive through. I think those workers were probably less likely to take advantage of our drive-through and walk-up sites, but we have those all over the state now. And so I think it's like, okay, and there's different reasons why they would have been probably a little shy about doing that. But I think the thing was, from a public health perspective, we were kind of identifying the areas. We knew prisons, we knew nursing homes. That was kind of the third leg, if you looked around the country, those types of things. And so they made a concerted effort to go out and get that done. Now, we now have a lot of resources. Remember, in March, I was literally on the phone directing 100 swabs at a time to different hospitals because they were so scarce. Well, now we can order as many swabs as you want. That whole supply chain has really opened up. So you have the ability to do some of that, and that does mean that you're testing people, a lot of people who are not symptomatic. And so the good thing about the ag, I mean, clearly it's definitely taken off here, but the good thing is if you can mitigate it, and one thing we've noticed, they get driven to work sometimes in these buses. So you look and you have like all these people crowded into buses. So we were talking to Palm Beach because they've got a number of the communities. They're thinking about maybe get more buses so you can have some people spread out a little bit. But you can definitely see it's just like really close contact. And then throughout the workday, that's what you're seeing from day to day. So, okay, well, very good. Thanks, guys.
You are watching the Florida Channel, a public service made possible by the Florida Legislature, WFSU TV, and Florida State University.